Most games don't lose players because of bad graphic or bad mechanic. They lose them because at some point the player has no idea what they're supposed to do right now. Hi, it's Seta here, and in this episode we will talk about goals in games, what they are, why they matter, and how to design them so the player don't turn off the game after 20 minutes and never come back to it. And just like previous video of this series, this one is a mix of game and level design knowledge, made mainly for solo developers, no matter which engine they use. Let's begin. Imagine that you put a player in an empty hallway. There are no enemies, no item, just a door at the end. The player will walk toward the door because they know why. Now, remove the door. The player stops, look around, try different things, and then get frustrated and quit game. What you took away was a goal, and a goal is the only thing that makes a player move in the first place. It is an unwritten contract between you and the player saying, do this and you will get something out of it. Your level can be technically perfect, but if the player doesn't know where they are going or why, they won't finish it. And this is where most beginners developers miss something important. When designing a game, you usually create one main goal. For example, the player has to escape a monster and find out what happened in the mansion. On paper, this sounds great, but the problem is that it is just one goal. If you build a level around only that, the player will wander around with no idea what to do next, and it will start to get bored. That's why you need to think about goals on the 3 levels at once: short term, mid term, and long term. Each one does something different in the player's mind, and all 3 are necessary. Let's start with the biggest one: long-term goals. These are the main reason and driving themes of your game. They cover the entire game, or at least a large part of it, and act like a hook that stays in the player's mind even after they turn off the game, motivating them to come back and play a game in the next day. To design it well, you need to remember a few things. First, the long-term goal has to be clear from the start, because it's at this point that the player decides whether the game is worth their time. And if they don't understand what they are aiming for, they won't wait to find out. So they need to know it before they take the first step. Not after an hour, not after a mid-game cutscene, but as soon as possible. Second, the player must feel like they are getting closer to that goal. It is not enough for it to exist somewhere in the background. Every major action the player takes should give them the feeling that they are moved one step forward. Third, keep in mind that the long-term goal doesn't just wrap up a single level, it closes a whole section of the game. Think of it like finishing a volume of a book. Fourth, remind the player of the goal during the game, not too often, but enough so they remember why they want to keep going. And last, this goal has to be worth the effort. The players need to be rewarded for their work, and the reward doesn't have to be mechanical. Sometimes a moment is enough, a scene, a story closing, something that makes the player feel it was all worth it. But a long-term goal alone isn't enough to keep the player at the screen. It gives the whole game a direction, but it doesn't give the player anything concrete to do it right now. That's why you need something that keeps them engaging for the next few minutes. Mid-term goals. They are all the tasks that takes the player anywhere from a few minutes to half an hour and end with a clear result, like finishing a level, completing a quest, or unlocking a new area. In practice, they work like a chapter in a book, because players usually don't stop playing at random moments. They stop after closing some kind of stage. And if that chapter was good, and the player feels like they are accomplished something, they will come back tomorrow to read the next one. The simplest way to design mid-term goals is to start from the long-term goal and break it down into concrete steps. Instead of thinking about the whole game at once, ask yourself, what exactly needs to happen in this section for the player to get closer to solving the main problem. Then build a level around that one thing and shape everything else from layout to pacing to challenge placement around it. In the midterm goals, the player also needs to know what the goal is from the start, and they need to feel like it is something they can actually achieve in that one session. It is also worth remembering to use the layout of the level to remind the player what they are working towards. A distance tower the player sees every now and then, a locked door they pass a few times, all of this is there to remind player where they are going. Attention control is also important. If you give the player several equal goals at the same time, they will start to lose focus and it becomes harder to them to make decisions. That doesn't mean that you can have side goals, but it always needs to be clear which one is the main one that ties the whole section together. A good example is when a player encounters a locked door and needs to find 4 keys. Opening the door is the midterm goals that define this section, while collecting each key is a smaller step toward that goal. This way, the player has a clear direction and concrete task to do at the same time. So, in practice, it comes down to this. There should be one main midterm goal that gives meaning to the entire section, and everything else should support it. But even well-designed midterm goals aren't enough if the gameplay between them isn't engaging, and this is where short-term goals come in. These are what truly drives player engagement. If there is nothing concrete to do for too long, and nothing attracts attention, the player will start to get bored. Even if the midterm goals is great and the long-term goals is compelling, empty space with no challenge along the way will kill the pacing of the entire level. Short-term goals operate on the scale of seconds or a few minutes and are directly tied to what the player is going at any given moment. These can be very simple things. Getting past a specific obstacle, defeating a group of enemies, or solving a small puzzle. On their own, these elements are small, but they fills the entire gameplay between the bigger stages. When designing short-term goals, you are essentially designing micro-situation. Every room, every turn, every small area should present the player with a clear local task. The player walking into a space should almost immediately understand what they need to be done. And remember that short-term goals should flow smoothly from one to the next, without long gaps where nothing happens, but also without overwhelming the player with too many things at once. In practice, this means alternating between more intense moments and short breathing spaces that let the player proceed what just happened and prepare for the next challenge. The player should immediately see the effect of their action and naturally move from one situation to another. This is what short-term goals are for. They build a consciously experience and make sure the game has no dead moments. So next time you are designing a level, ask yourself, does the player knows where they are going? Do they know what they are achieving in this session? And do they know what they should be doing right now? If the answer of any of these is no, you know where the problem is. That's why designing goals on the 3 layers, long-term, mid-terms and short-terms, gives the players the clear direction, a sense of purpose in every session, and engaging gameplay in every single minute. And a player who always knows what to do and why, it's a player you won't lose. And that's all for this video. If it was helpful, leave a like. If you have any questions, write them in the comments below. And if you want to learn more, check out other videos on the channel. And until next time, see ya.